The Softears Studio 4 Starry Night Edition. Let's talk about it. Now, this is a sample sent out to me by Hifigo. All thoughts and opinions are my own. This is a 4BA IEM that was released a long time ago in black. And this is a different version. The tuning hasn't changed and a lot of the packaging hasn't as well. This cable I'm using on it is actually not a stock cable, but I think it looks pretty. Let's start and get into the build quality of this guy. So the build quality of this IEM is pretty nice. It has really good isolation. The faceplate looks fantastic, but you'll notice it's kind of a large shell. And so it does kind of block out the sound a little bit. So the CO on my ears is very strong. It doesn't really have a lip, so it just kind of sits there. That's maybe one of the small problems with it. It doesn't really have a grate on the nozzle. It's not hard to keep ear tips in. I didn't have any problems. I like the translucent nature of this. You can see all 4 BAs working on this quite well. And I think overall it's solid shell with some minor faults that we talked about. Now the packaging of this is nice. There's an extension cable, some little IEM booties. There's also a set of tips and a 6.3 connector. Now the case is nice. It's just kind of a studio looking case. You know, it's like a pelican case and it is kind of small. The cable itself is nice. It's a black cable. It does have a Y split, of course, but it doesn't have a chin slider, which, you know, might be a bad thing for some people. The cable itself is nice and plush, but not super exciting, and it terminates in a 3.5 connection. The sound of this IEM, how does this guy sound? Quite phenomenal from the get-go. Really great highs, really upper air and detail, and some of the best extension that I have heard under, say, $800. It's really quite amazing. It has really strong vocals, it has really good mids, and it does some things very exceptional. I'm very impressed with this set, but now let's take a look at some graphs. Before we got too deep into it, I did want to show you this IEM on Hifigo's page. They're the one that sent it out. But if you look here, you can kind of see a picture of all the accessories. Again, very for studio use. And you can see the faceplate. But another noticeable thing to talk about is the price. The price being at $368, I think is quite exceptional. Okay, let's look at the graph of the Softears Studio 4. You'll notice it has a nice graph. It has that nice triangular graph that looks really well. It has a mild bass shelf, but you know, it's overall not bad as far as bass goes. It's nice and impactful, and it feels appropriate, but just it's not an overly bassy set by any means. Let's look at some other graphs. First one I want to compare this to is the Twilight. Now the Twilight does have a little bit more warmth, and I think the Twilight is a special single dynamic driver. I personally like the Studio 4 better. I could see people liking either one. I think, to me, the Studio 4 has this really amazing extension and like detail. Like the only thing I've really heard that has that I really like is the Annihilator, and I think that's kind of high praise. Like it has that really great articulate details, and I really enjoy what it does to my music. I think the Softears Twilight, I mean, it's a completely different sound because of the dynamic driver, but it sounds really punchy, it sounds really smooth, and it is just a beautiful IEM. Both of these are really good, but again, I like the Studio 4 better, and I also like the price tag of the Studio 4 as it's less than half the price. But again, both of these are very strong IEMs. Another one to look at is the volume. Now, I'm kind of conflicted with the volume. The volume has a nice graph, but it just doesn't have the sonic qualities, the technicalities, and other things going on about it. That doesn't mean that the volume is bad. On the contrary, it's a nice set. But I think that there's only like $100 difference between the two. And I do have to say that the Studio 4, to me, in my ears, is worth the additional price. and I think you might enjoy it better. I think the extension is a little bit better. Its tune is a little bit cleaner, and it's just overall, to me, in my ears, a better set, but it costs more and it kind of makes sense. The only one I want to show you is the RSV. I think these two trade blows really, really well. I like the RSV, but it felt like it had some muffled problems in the bass, but it has nice detail and it is really clean and fun. I think the Studio 4 might be a better way to go. It's cheaper. I think it sounds a little better, and you know, that's just my ear and just what I like. But I think the Studio 4, you know, it's interesting. You can say that sometimes people don't have a house sound when it comes to some companies. Like, you can see that Softears kind of does in some ways. Another one to look at, this kind of reminds me of, is the Monarch Mark II. The Monarch Mark II comes across to me a little bit grainy. It has a beautiful graph. It has good extension, but it just has some graininess that I'm not a huge fan of. It's possible it might have been my set, but I'm just not a hyper fan of the Monarch II, and I think you get a very similar tonality for a lot cheaper for about that same price. But you'll notice they really do trade blows with, you know, just a few dB here and there, and you know, to me they have a lot of like a similar sound signature. But again, the Studio 4 does have some lovely vocals and lovely things going on, and I feel like there's a good cohesiveness about the Studio 4 that can make it either contender or better. For me, I like it slightly better. Another one to look at is the XINHS. Now, the XINHS will probably be on sale on Linsell Hill pretty soon. You'll notice some good things about it. The bass regions are a lot different. You know, like if you normalize this around 300, I kind of want to show this to you. If you normalize this at 300, what do you notice? The XINHS does have more mid bass, but it has way more treble, and that's kind of a fault to me. But don't get me wrong, the XINHS is a beautiful set. And if you're kind of looking for something like this, maybe this or the Volume could be a good set. But I think if you can stretch and you're in the market for the Studio 4, it's definitely worth it. And it's a really solid set. I wanted to show you what this looks like with a 10 ohm adapter. Sometimes it makes a difference for the good and sometimes for the bad. I think the more impedance you get, you're going to get more treble and less bass, and it's going to come across really poor, I think, to most people. I think you're better off with a source with low impedance, and I think you're going to get better results with this set because it will be a little bit source picky for some things, and you might want to watch out for that. Another one to compare this to is the Crimson. Now, I like the Crimson, but the Crimson has a ton of energy right here, has a ton of bass, and it just doesn't really seem that dynamic and punchy, whereas like the Studio 4 really works for me for what it's trying to do. I also think the Crimson has a little bit too much spicy upper air and a little bit too much spicy mid-treble region. So I think that even though the Crimson's one of those sets at 1700, it doesn't necessarily mean that one's better than the other. Tuning at this point matters more, and I think the Softears Studio 4 is tuned exceptionally, and it's beautiful with every second that I want to listen to it, and I love that set. Another thing to look at, I'm trying to look at a few sets that have similar tuning, is the KW-Ears 4, and you'll notice the KW-Ears 4 has a bit more bass. It has a little bit less treble. I think, you know, for tonal balance wise, I kind of like a little bit more bass on the Studio 4, but I feel like the KW-Ears 4 doesn't have exactly the same amount of treble that I would like. But again, these do trade blows. It's hard for me to say that, you know, the Studio 4 is that much better, but I do feel that it's better. I do like the sound qualities of it, and from what I experience in my music, just again, that extension, that upper air, and another one to look at is the Truth Air Hexa. Now, the Hexa, you know, these graph very similarly, and in some ways you might even say that the Hexa has a better graph, but the dynamics of the Hexa are not really even on the same plane as the Studio 4. And I mainly wanted to show this is that the dynamics and bass of the Studio 4, it looks really lean, but it doesn't bother me as much as I would think due to the graph. And I really think that, if you like the hex and you want to upgrade, but you also don't want to spend a crazy amount, I really think the Studio4 could be an exceptional value for people. One more to think about that I really like that has that bass shelf for me and has a nice upper mids that does a lot of things well is the Binary Dyna Quattro. I like this set, and it's just a fantastic set. That's one of like my IEMs that I just love it. The one thing to note about this set though is that the air and the detail on it aren't really lacking. So it's kind of like you trade blows. One that has poor air, one has a little bit less sub bass that you might want. And it's just kind of a trade-off that you have to decide what might be better for you. But I think if you're really after a bass set, the Dyna Quattro has really close to that level of mids, but its air and upper details and extension just aren't the same. The Studio4 is one of my favorite IEMs under $500. Like, it's really an impressive set with a great tone, a great tune, and some amazing things. I like its bass and it doesn't bother me, and I think it's a really strong, balanced bass, and I was really impressed with it. Its overall tuning is really strong with just a few minor issues in the bass, but its treble and its air extension are so nice. Its imaging and clarity are really good. Again, it's no weight, it's not a slammy set, but I think that's something you can fix with a little bit of EQ, but it has a great sense of space and air around it. And it's just, there is something magical about this set, and it is, to me, it is a benchmark and a beautiful set to boot. A little bird told me the other day that there might be some new designs coming up of some other sets. As to which, I can't really confirm yet, but I've heard that this might be kind of a trend going on. It's something that I know the consumerism of this hobby is a little bit frustrating for some, but part of that fun is for people is to buy something like this and to get something new and fun and match a cable, and that's part of this hobby. I think that's one of the great things about the IEM hobby is that you can match a new cable. You can get a new set that looks pretty just because of the looks, and it's just something that we're allowed to do. A lot of guys, they'll have a car and they'll paint a new car a different color, or they'll get a new steering wheel, and it becomes one of those things that people will think, well, it's kind of crazy. This is a hobby. This is the hobby of getting things that you like and enjoy, and I think if you can get something you like and enjoy, and you like the design even more, it's an even better thing to go. And I think the Softears Studio4 is one of those legendary sets that I'm glad I've got to experience and review, and it gets a full recommendation from me. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below, and I hope you guys have a great day. We will be having a video giveaway for when we hit 2,000 subs here pretty soon. Again, we're getting close, and I appreciate everybody's support. Bye-bye. You're still here. It's over. Go home. Go watch another IEM video. It's done. That's the entire video. What more do you want?